Hello and welcome to How to Manage Your Current Year Operating Budget. I'm Trina Martin, and driving the computers with me is Tony Pranger, and we're looking at the UAN software. We're staying in the UAN software today. This course is designed to take you through managing the two components of your current year operating budget in the UAN software. So we aren't talking about the preparation of the 2019 tax budget, which you'll be doing soon. This is all about the current year, 2018. I'll be taking some polls during the training today, and we're going to send the first one out. So, Tony, if you'll go down to polls and select that first poll. How long have you been the fiscal officer or the assistant at your entity? Go ahead and mark one item and click submit, and I'll give the audience a couple of minutes to finish that. While you're answering that question, I want to talk about the two components of the current year operating budget. This is key to understanding and managing your current year, is understanding that there are two different components. They have a separate purpose and are managed separately. That's going to be key to helping you understand your operating budget better. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and close that poll and share those results with you. You can see that our audience is made up. You may be surprised to see that 47% of you have been in office more than 4 years. And you newbies are probably thinking, well, why are those people showing up to this webinar? Well, the current year operating budget is confusing to a lot of people, and there's not a lot of training about it. So I'm really excited about this opportunity to cover this subject. It's never been done at UAN either. So we're happy to be able to provide this. You can see that I'm hoping to really strengthen your understanding of the current year. So let's go ahead and hide that and get started. So we're going to talk about these two components of your current year operating budget so you understand what I'm talking about. Component number one is your resources available, certified by your county auditor or budget commission. The first time you see that is on the official certificate of estimated resources, and then later on the amended official certificate of estimated resources, commonly known as your amended certificate. It's not the appropriations. Its purpose is to set the maximum amount your board can appropriate. It's just the maximum. So it's very important to understand this component, what its purpose is, and where the numbers come from. We'll be covering that. Of course, component number two is your board adopted appropriations. And when I say that, I mean the board must adopt legislation setting the appropriations, whether they're temporary, permanent, or supplemental. Appropriations are always limited by the total resources available on your current certificate. That would be the official or the amended, whichever one is in place at the time those appropriations are adopted. So there's our two components. I'm going to send out the next poll. What part of your current year operating budget is confusing? And in this poll, you can mark any of these items that are confusing to you. So we want to, it's not just a one answer. You can mark any of those items that are confusing. We can see the results coming in. It's funny how the very first people marked all of them. So 100% of the people who answered it first found 100% of these items the most confusing items. So I'm glad we're operating this training again. I think there's a real need for this kind of training, and it's hard to find. So when we're looking at the current year operating budget, because there's two separate components, we have to look at separate reports. And I think that's where a lot of people get confused. They're comparing apples to oranges. They're looking at the wrong reports for the component they're trying to manage. Let's go ahead and close that poll and share the results with you. You can see that 76% of you are very confused by mid-year changes, and it's no wonder. Those are confusing. A high percentage of that certification of fund balances at the beginning of the year as well. What is the amended certificate and reallocation? So I'm not really surprised by the answer. Okay, we'll start by looking at component number one, the resources available. And we want to go back to the beginning. Where do the resources available start in the process of a current year operating budget? Well, about 70 counties in Ohio still require the filing of a tax budget for the next year by July of the current year. That means that those of you who are going to file a tax budget will be starting on that process soon, working on 2019's revenue estimates, right? That's where the process starts, is that tax budget. Now, I realize there are some of you in the audience that live in those counties that no longer file a tax budget. You would have different procedures to send your county auditor your estimated revenue for the new year. And each one of them probably have a different procedure. So you'll need to contact your county auditor so that you understand how that process begins in your county. In 2017, when you prepared the 2018 tax budget, you entered estimated annual revenue as well as planned appropriation. Tony, let's show them the 2018 tax budget. We're going to go to Budget, Transactions, and Financial Worksheets. And we have to change the year to 2017 because it was in 2017 that we created the 2018 tax budget. It's always the way it works. And let's go ahead and display that, Tony. And what I want to do is mark the general fund only. We're not going to show all of them. And then if you'll mark include account codes. We want to see this by account code. This is the most useful way for the fiscal officer to see this report. So while you can't file it with the county by account code, you do want to look at it yourself by account code. Let's go ahead and display that report. When I print this by accounts, showing the accounts, I can see how I estimated my revenue at each account code level. I'm going to need this in January. So we get calls at the beginning of the year. Where do I get these numbers? Well, you already had these numbers. If you filed a tax budget, you should already know what these are. Lots of folks don't recall that this budget, as a matter of fact, I hear a lot of fiscal officers say things like, well, that tax budget doesn't mean anything. Yes, it does. It creates your first official certificate. It means something. These are the numbers we told our county auditor that we were going to receive in 2018. When you filed the tax budget, your county budget commission reviewed it and then sent it back to you with an official certificate of estimated resources for the new year. That is your first certification of resources available. That official certificate limits the amount your board could appropriate until that first amended certificate was filed in 2018. So many people receive the tax budget and the official certificate back from the county, and they never look to see if the county certified their revenue estimates. It's very important. This year, when you file your tax budget, when it comes back, be sure to pull out that official certificate and compare it to your numbers. So what would I be looking at? The total revenue for each fund. If I looked at the official certificate and compared it to this total revenue for each fund, I would see whether the county certified my numbers or if they changed them. I need to know that to know whether these are the numbers I'm going to enter in 2018 as my revenue budgets. So you would know with your official certificate if your revenue budgets were not certified. So I want you to be aware that shouldn't be surprising. You should see whether they were certified or whether they've been changed. So our official certificate is built from your tax budget. Those of you that live in the counties that don't file a tax budget, you are probably sending something to estimate the revenue at some point before year end, and you get the official certificate back. So again, contact your county for that. Our second step in the current year operating budget happens after you close the prior year. Tony, let's close this form. I want to look at the document that begins our certification of fund balances and revenues at the beginning of each year. It's found right here under Budget and Transactions, and it's the year-end balance certificate. And we would be looking at 2018, not 2017. In 18, we certified balances as of 12/31/17, and you can see our document is listed here. Now, in your case, at your office, you're probably not going to go here. What I would like you to do is pull out the copy from your file that you sent to the county auditor. You may not have used UAN to create this document. Some people create it manually. So look to your file. What did you send your county? So let's go ahead and display that, Tony. The first page groups all the funds by fund type. So let's go to the second page, and we see each fund individually. You can see that the resources available are built from the carryover cash balance. That's your actual fund cash balance on December 31st, less the carryover encumbrances. That's your carryover purchase orders and unpaid employee withholdings, less your reserve for non-spendable balance. If it's non-spendable, of course, it's not going to be available for appropriation. So if your funds have a non-spendable balance, they would have the amount in this column. If you have reserve balance accounts, they would also be subtracted from your fund balance. Advances not repaid, notice that the fund that is repaying the advance has the negative. The fund that is receiving the repayment is a positive, so that is impacted positively. And this creates your carryover balance available for appropriation. Now, these are the numbers you sent to your county. If you created this form manually, you may not have sent the right figures. The UAN software will show you what figures should have been sent. This column, the carryover balance available for appropriation, should match your first column, the unencumbered fund balance, on your amended certificate. This is where the county got those figures, is from your certification. So a lot of people look at that and they say, where? That's not my cash balance. Where'd it come from? Well, you can see that the cash is adjusted by these items that change what's available for appropriation. These first 5 columns are pulled from your UAN software automatically based on what you've posted or have entered in the UAN software. You should have certified these exact figures to the county. If there's an error in your amended certificate, it doesn't match your UAN software, you would have to look and see if it involves your unencumbered fund balance and take a look. Did you certify the correct numbers to the county auditor, or did you send them the wrong numbers? They don't know you sent them the wrong numbers. Back on this form, you can see that added to the unencumbered fund balance, let's mark the selection mode, is the total amount for all sources available for expenditures. Well, that's just another way to say estimated annual revenue. So you have told the county auditor, this is how much we think we're going to receive. Well, these are the exact same numbers from my tax budget. Now, sometimes I understand that there's a change. You might have raised the sewer rates and things like that, but let's not take all those individual considerations in place. Let's say that you estimated the revenue well. The county auditor certified your numbers because you looked at your official certificate and you can tell that this is exactly what they certified. There shouldn't be any confusion when you get back your amended certificate. So in UAN, when you complete this form, we recommend that you enter the revenue budgets in UAN first, and then when you create this document, the total for each fund pulls automatically in, and that means what you have in the UAN software exactly matches what you're sending to the county. So there's no errors in entering. Some people don't take the time to enter the revenue budgets first. They just type in the total, and you may have manually entered the wrong number. So we would need to know, did you enter the correct number when you certified it to the county, or did you make a mistake when you entered the revenue budgets? So let's go take a look at where those numbers get entered into the UAN software. Go ahead and close this form and close the year-end balance certificate and the financial worksheets. We're going to head over to accounting, maintenance, and revenue budgets. At the beginning of each year, this form is blank. There is no estimated revenue to start each year. You have to add the fund's estimated revenue. It won't transfer over from the budget software. It must be entered manually. Really, it takes 5 minutes. Remember, you should already know what these numbers are. You file a tax budget, you got an official certificate back. If you print your tax budget by account, easy peasy to enter these. Tony, if we'll mark the general fund and click display so they can see how those are entered. They've been entered by account code, and this matches my tax budget. There were no changes. So if my county certified on my official certificate, all my revenue exactly the same, I knew in January that those were my revenue estimates, and I can enter them by account. So those were entered at the beginning of the year. If I enter these first, they automatically pull into the year-end balance certificate, automatically creating that form so that there's no typographical errors, no math errors. It is exactly what you've entered. That's what we recommend. Let's talk about the amended certificate more. Go ahead and close out of here. On most counties' amended certificates form, the total estimated annual revenue is split into two groups: taxes and other sources. And I understand that your county may not use that format. There's 88 counties. I really can only handle, the majority here. You're going to have to contact your county if they use a different structure. So those inside columns that represent the estimated annual revenue, you have to know what the county is considering taxes, and that can differ from county to county. I've seen that differ from county to county. It's going to be important for you to know when you get your amended certificate back and it's certified in taxes and other sources, what did they push into the taxes column and what do they have in other sources? So let's take a look in UAN at the revenue budget report so we can see by the individual accounts. Go ahead and close revenue budgets. We'll go to accounting, reports and statements, revenue reports. And you're all familiar with the revenue status, but I want to show you a nice clean report for just the revenue budget. Select all of those and display. Okay, so these are a report of our revenue budgets, and mark that selection mode. On most county auditors' taxes column, and I'm saying most, you'll have to call your county to make sure, they are considering the general property real estate tax plus what the state sends you back in rollbacks as taxes. So you would be looking at these two amounts, the 300 plus the 140,000 in the taxes column. Now that's usual. If that's not how it's adding up on your amended certificate, you would need to call your county and say, hey, what are you considering taxes? And then you would look at this revenue budget, and then you would mark which ones. Make yourself a cheat sheet, print your revenue budget, and then highlight the ones that are taxes and make yourself a key. These are taxes, and keep that in your revenue file so that you can keep track of it. Everything else that is not taxes is usually going to be found in the other sources column. So when you get your first amended certificate back, you would look at that and see if it matched. I'm going to show you a nice report to do that. Let's go to, Tony, close that form and go to budgetary report. So we're always going to be in accounting and reports. Budgetary report, there is our resources available for appropriation. Let's select all those funds and display. Mark that in 1+. And this is our resources available. You can see these first 5 columns are the same ones that appeared on our year-end balance certificate. We just don't have a column totaling them. These columns, again, should match what you certified in, let's mark this selection mode. This is your estimated revenue. So if you're looking at your amended certificate form, again, those inside columns, usually taxes and other sources, should add up to these numbers. So if you looked at the bottom, what I would look at first on my amended certificate is the total estimated resources. Does this far right column match my amended certificate exactly? That's what we're looking for. If it matches exactly, print a copy of this, put it in the file with your amended certificate, go on with your day. It matches. If it doesn't match, we would need to talk about why. What if they don't match? What would I look at? Well, first you have to determine is if the problem is in the first 5 columns, your unencumbered fund balance, what numbers did you certify to the county? Because the county's amended certificate, that unencumbered fund balance is based on what you sent them. If you did not send them these numbers, you sent them the wrong numbers. So we need to know where's the mistake. I would always check the estimated revenue first, see if taxes and other sources add to this. And if those are exactly correct, then I would take a look at my, what did I send the county when I certified my fund balances at the beginning of the year? Are these the numbers I sent? Okay, so I need to know where's the mistake. Sometimes you have mistakes in both. So let's talk about, many people don't realize that their county auditor and budget commission has the authority to tweak your numbers. They don't have to certify what you send. You may have very carefully estimated your revenue, and yet they didn't certify them. You got your amended certificate back. Now remember, I told you if you filed a tax budget, your official certificate should have already revealed to you that they tweaked your numbers. Maybe not, but that should have. So you should have already been aware when you certified your estimated revenue at the beginning of the year, you had to tweak your numbers to match. So why would they tweak your numbers? Well, we do have counties that exactly certify what the fiscal officer requested. We have some counties that will tweak the taxes to the 100% tax that is going to be charged to the residents. So are you ever going to get exactly 100% of what's charged? No, but that's what they certify. So you would need to tweak your tax numbers to match what they've certified. We also have counties that take the fiscal officer's estimate and reduce them all by a percentage because nobody ever receives 100% of the revenue. That one's hard to work with. So everything is reduced. That's a more difficult situation. You have to know what your county auditor does. So let's say that you know what your county auditor's policy is and you thought you were following it, but when you get your amended certificate back, it is not the same as this total resources available. What are you going to look at first? Well, number one, look at your estimated revenue. Do the taxes and other sources column add up to this? If not, why not? So like I said, some people don't use the UAN software to create the year-end balance certificate. They manually complete that and then enter the revenue budgets in UAN, and they don't match. So if you certified to the county a different number as your estimated revenue, you need to change your revenue budgets to match what you requested. And I want to say again, sometimes the county will make a mistake, just simply make a mistake. So check and make sure it's not just an error on their part before you lose your mind in trying to figure out the difference. So check what you certified to the county. Is that what you entered in UAN, and is that what they certified? So you know whether they changed your numbers or whether you entered a different number as a revenue budget. We need to know. So how would you correct that? Let's say that my county tweaked my tax numbers and I didn't see that on the official certificate. So I need to correct my UAN software's revenue budget so that it matches my amended certificate. So this isn't the county auditor's mistake. They have increased my tax revenue certification. The other sources is exactly what I requested. Again, I would have to know by account code which numbers have changed, and I would call the county to find out the exact figures they've certified for each account. Tony, let's go ahead and close this. To correct that number, let's go to accounting, maintenance, and revenue budgets. And if it's a tax number, it's probably going to affect more than one fund. We're only going to take the time to show one. So let's mark our general fund and click supplemental. Supplemental means we are changing the total estimated revenue for a fund. All right, it's our taxes and the property tax allocation that's changed. So I'm looking at what the county certified for taxes. I've called them and they've told me the exact number for each one. So we are adding to the general property tax $123.45, and property tax allocation we're adding $12.34. And I know that that's easy for us. You can put a purpose in the box, but you don't have to. The date, what date would I use? Well, you have two options. You either enter the same date that you originally sent these to your county, that you entered these to begin with, or date them the date of your amended certificate. But we want to look at this. Notice the box in the bottom, apply as correction. This is the only time you use this, when you are correcting an error in your beginning of year revenue budgets. So it's never used moving forward to add new revenue. It is simply to correct a mistake. So this is going to change what appears on your 2018 annual financial report as the original revenue budget. And I need to correct that. So we'll say okay. And my effective date for our purposes was February 9th. That was the date we originally put in our revenue budgets. And I'm going to save that and close. I would repeat that for each fund that I had to change the certification of revenue to match what the county certified. Let's go back to that budgetary report. I would print a new resources available. And now the far right column should match my amended certificate exactly, right? If my only problem was my estimated revenue and the only difference was the county tweaked my tax numbers, I have now got an amended certificate and UAN software that matches exactly. In the same case, if I did not certify what I put in as revenue budgets, I'm still correcting my mistake and I still need to match that. If the problem is not in the estimated revenue, if it's in these first 5 columns that make up your unencumbered fund balance, it means you've certified the wrong numbers to the county at the beginning of the year, or your county made a mistake. So you have to check, pull out your year-end balance certificate. Did you include these exact numbers in each of these columns? If you didn't give this certification exactly to the county, you made a mistake. These numbers, again, are in UAN as exact figures. Right or wrong, if you close the year with carryover encumbrances, you have to live with it the year. So make sure that you certified these exact numbers so that your unencumbered fund balance, that first column on your amended certificate, shows the same thing that UAN does. So if you made a mistake and certified the wrong numbers, we get a lot of calls at the beginning of the year. People sent that year-end balance certificate before they'd done their 2017 bank rec. They posted interest receipts. That's changing the fund balances. They closed purchase orders, changed the reserve for encumbrance. You can't certify the fund balances and encumbrances and revenue before it's time. So you don't want to certify that prematurely. We often want to say, wait until you close 2017 before you create that document to be perfectly safe. We've covered how your first amended certificate, where those numbers come from, and remember what they mean. That creates the maximum your board can appropriate. It is not appropriations. So that's your ceiling. Think of it as, this we cannot exceed. Doesn't mean you've appropriated. It is simply what you could appropriate. We now have a more complete understanding of that, and I want to send out the next poll. So Tony, if we'll go to polls, our next poll, how often do you request an amended certificate? Mark one of these, and I think what you'll see when I broadcast the results is it doesn't happen very often, and it's no wonder people have a lack of understanding of what to do when there are mid-year changes. So it's not an everyday occurrence. So pat yourself on the back. You're not the only one confused by this. I think these polls are going to help you feel better about why you've been confused. And while we're waiting for those polls to be answered, the current amended certificate can be revised as revenue estimates change. So what if in January they raise the sewer rates? Well, that's going to change your sewer revenue. You would have to request an amended certificate. Some other things, new money, a transfer, interfund transfer is going to change what you had considered as revenue. Lots of things happen that would require you to request an amended certificate. I'm going to go ahead and close that poll and share that with you. So you can see we've got a lot of rarely and sometimes on my side. Is that what you see over there, Tony?
Yes.
Okay, so this is not, it doesn't happen every day. So, and I'll tell you what, there's no cookie cutter. You can't have one answer to, do I need an amended certificate? Because the situations are going to be different. Sometimes you got more money than you anticipated, but it's February. Should I get an amended certificate for a couple of $100 extra in February? Not so certain. So it is a subject that can be a little gray. Let's talk about that. So I've shared those. Let's go ahead and hide them and move on. We have to have a reason for an amended certificate. So let's get an example together. Last year, our fire chief applied for a grant for fire equipment for $5,000, and we just received the grant award notice. I did not include this money in our revenue certification at the beginning of the year because I didn't know if we were going to get the grant. It's very important. If you don't know you're getting the money, probably should not include that at the beginning of the year. Lots of grants get applied for and are never received. So I did not include it. We do need to get it certified now because we've got it. The money's going to be coming in. So I have to request an amended certificate. And the reason I have to request the amended certificate specifically is because the board has to appropriate the extra $5,000. So in those entities where you appropriate 100% of your resources available, this would require an amended certificate before your board could appropriate the extra money. So let's follow those steps in this example. So I got the award notice. I'm the fiscal officer. The letter comes to me. Of course, it's going to be given to everybody that needs to see it, but I have work to do first. I'm going to get an amended certificate before the next meeting. So the fiscal officer sends a request for amended certificate. Tony, we've got an example of that. Let's pull up our sample letter number 1. And I have just put together, notice the date is 3/15. So I'm not going to keep going out of the software and moving the date forward like we do in some of our training, simply because we can live in pretend land here. I know that you guys have an imagination, and you can pretend with me that on 3/15, I am doing this. I got the award letter on 3/15 that says we got the grant. It's coming to us. So I know that I need to get that money certified on the amended certificate. So it's on official letterhead. I'm following my county's procedures. Some of your counties have a form you need to complete. Some of them want a letter. Some of them say you can send an email. Some of them require documentation and others don't. So I'm just giving you an example. And I'm sending off an official letter. We have been awarded a $5,000 equipment grant for the fire fund. Please issue an amended certificate increasing our other sources revenue in the fire levy fund 2191 by $5,000. It's a specific request. And then my county, my fake county in fake Buckeye Township, wants documentation. And I know some of your counties want this as well. So when do I put in the revenue budget? Well, it's going to depend on what your county wants to see. I have already added the $5,000 to my UAN software revenue budget, and I am enclosing a new resources available for appropriation, a revenue budget report, and a copy of the grant award letter. If you have any questions, do not hesitate to contact me. So I send that, I sign that, and I keep a copy for my file. Everything that is in this letter and all its attachments are in my revenue certification file, and I send that off. Now in UAN, like I said, some of your counties want to see that revenue budget and your resources available at the time you're asking. Others, you wait until you get the amended certificate and then you put these in. So neither one is wrong. Follow your county's procedures so that you can give them the reports they want at the time of the request. If they don't want them ahead of time, put them in once you receive that. So again, remember, it's backwards in time. We're pretending that it is early in the month. It's March 15th. And in order to send these documents with the letter, I've got to enter the revenue budget. So the first thing I want to do is go to accounting and maintenance. And I first need to see, this is new money. Do I have an account code to put the grant money in? So let's take a look at revenue accounts and then scroll down to our fire fund 2191. And we've got these few account codes. And I want to look and see, do one of these represent where I would put this grant? I can't tell. So there's nothing that says grant. I'm not going to guess. I'm not going to throw a grant into other miscellaneous ever. It's important to put the grant money where it belongs. So in my annual financial report, it shows we got a grant. So in this case, what I want to do is look at the chart of accounts to see if I've got an account code already open that is going to be of use, or if I need to add a new one. So I'm going to click on under FAQs, Township Revenue Codes. We'll open that up to full screen and get rid of the sides. Okay, the township revenue codes, of course, those of you who are villages click on village. Those of you who are libraries, click on libraries. And remember that revenue is in groups. Grants are not in the group property and other local taxes. Remember, this is a state grant. We're going to getting a grant from the state. So I'm not going to put it in that group. In the charges for services, no. License, permits, and fees, no. Keep going down. Fines and forfeitures, no. That's not where grants rise. And here we go, intergovernmental. Now I want to caution villages. Villages have 2 intergovernmental groups. So don't stop at the first one. Scroll down and look at both intergovernmental groups to make sure you are choosing the right account code. So you're going to read through these items in their description to see where it belongs. Well, it's not a federal grant, so I can eliminate the first 3. It's not a state tax, local government, liquor permits, cigarette, property tax. Okay, I've eliminated those as well. Moving down to the next page, motor vehicle, nope. Gasoline tax, local public works. Well, it's a grant, but this is not an OPWC grant. It doesn't have anything to do with issue 2 or OPWC. So even though it says grant, I skip it. And then we get to other state receipts. Look at that. Receipt of any other state grant not described in the revenue codes 531 through 538. Well, I looked at all of those. It's not described there. So other state receipts, 539 would be my choice. All right. So close out of that. And if you've looked at the revenue codes and you're still not certain what to use, always give local government services a call. Remember, this is going to do something to your annual financial report. You want the right account. If you look on my accounts, I already have the 539 other state receipts activated. I don't need a new account. I can post it right to this. So I'm ready to go. Close the revenue accounts. And we're on the revenue budgets now. So again, accounting and maintenance, revenue budgets is where I would go. I've got that tab open. We mark the fire fund and we're clicking supplemental. We are adding to. This is new, not a correction, but new money. So on my other state receipts, where the grant belongs, $5,000 is entered. I can put a purpose in the box. I don't have to, but I can. And the effective date. So some of you use the effective date, the date you requested the amended certificate. Others are waiting until the amended certificate comes back and entering this date, the date that the amended certificate is dated. So follow your procedures in your county. We're dating this March 15th. One of the things you have to understand in your county, go ahead and save that, Tony, and close, is what's the turnaround time on your amended certificate? Some counties, you send in a request for amended certificate and they will do it right then and fax it back to you and then mail you the original. So the turnaround time is very quick. In other counties, the Budget Commission meets once a month, like the 3rd Thursday of each month. So if I request an amended certificate the day after that, I'm waiting almost a month before I'm going to get my amended certificate. So you really do need to know your county's procedures and turnaround time for requesting an amended certificate so you can get these done and let your board know. I'm still waiting for the amended certificate. At the next meeting, you will be appropriating that money. So that's going to stop everything because you don't have an amended certificate that would allow you to appropriate if you're waiting for that. All right, let's take a look then. We would go back to accounting reports and budgetary reports. I already have it open, and check our resources available. So when that new amended certificate comes in the mail, I'm checking, does it match? County auditors make mistakes. Make sure you're checking this every single time. You're going to be audited based on that physical piece of paper you get from the county. Check it every time. I always print the resources available and have that in my file. So if you didn't print it ahead of time, again, if it comes in the mail, check. Make sure you got the number certified that you requested. All right. All right. That covers how to get a new amended certificate. Now, we're not covering the appropriation portion of that, what you would do with the rest of the project, because we're talking only about that first component. I want to Also say that the township fiscal officers in our audience have another level of responsibility when it comes to the amended certificate. The trustee and fiscal officer salaries are based on the pay scale associated with the resources available for appropriation. So when you request an amended certificate, you need to check and see if that has bumped you into a new pay scale. Very, very important to know that. So what I would do is print a copy of the pay scale and stick it in my file for my certified resources available for the year. And every time I requested an amended certificate, when it came, I would check the pay scale against that. Did we move into the next pay bracket or not? Now, I realize that even with a situation like this where the $5,000 is a grant and it is not going to be used to pay those trustees' salary, the new amended certificate did bump us up into a new pay bracket. And we get a lot of questions about that. Well, how am I going to pay it? We don't have any extra money. It's not a UAN question. I'm sorry. I understand the difficulties of those situations. That would be a conversation to LGS. Your board and your governing board would have to determine what to do about that raise if it cannot be afforded by the funds that pay your salaries. We also get a lot of questions. I got a new amended certificate on March 16th. Do the trustees and the fiscal officers raise take effect for the month of March, or do we have to wait till April? It's a very good question, but it's not one UAN support can ask. Remember, we're software support. That question goes to LGS. Make sure you get an answer. Write down who you spoke with, the date you talked to them, and the answer they gave you, and adjust your pace accordingly. So make sure you're asking the question. Do not guess at that. We get a lot of folks that overpaid or underpaid because they didn't check the pay scale when they get an amended certificate, or they gave the raise too soon. So make sure you are understanding when those things take place. That covers the amended certificate and certifying the new revenue. That covers component number 1. Remember, these are 2 separate components. This component certifies the maximum amount your board can appropriate. That's its only purpose. Let's move to component number 2. Our second component of the current year operating budget is the board adopted appropriations. So the governing board adopts appropriations to authorize operations and spending. Appropriations should be in place the entire year. Appropriations are always adopted as legislation, whether resolution or villages do those by ordinance. The board can adopt up to or less than their total resources available on their current certificate. Wouldn't it be nice if there was a report that shows how much of our resources available had been appropriated? Well, UAN has a report for that. Many of you are not taking a look at these reports. So we go back to budgetary reports, and from the drop-down list, choose comparison of budget and appropriated. This is my go-to. I use this report a lot. You want to select all your funds, and let's display that for them. And make it full screen, but don't click the plus sign. This report, let's mark the selection mode. We still see all the columns that make up our resources available, from our fund balance, all those items, and we do have a column for total estimated resources. So this column, total estimated resources, again, is going to match the far right column on your amended certificate. Pulls it all together. And then we have the final appropriations. So UAN is showing what you have entered as board adopted appropriations, and the far right column variance is taking your total resources, the amount you are allowed to appropriate, subtracting what you have appropriated, and showing the variance. The variance is what you still have available to appropriate. Excellent. So notice that we are not appropriating 100% of our money. In some counties, the County Budget Commission frowns on that terribly. Others, they want you to appropriate less than 100%. You really do need to understand your county's procedures in order to know, should we really appropriate 100% or not? And you do have to kind of work with them on this. You should never see a negative in the variance column. If you see a negative, it means your board has appropriated more than you were allowed to. So right off the bat, if I saw a negative in this column, we've got a problem. So is my problem, I don't have my revenue budgets entered correctly? Or I accidentally entered too many appropriations. I got my fingers on the wrong keys and I haven't actually appropriated. The board didn't appropriate these numbers. So you have to check and make sure that what you've entered matches your legislation. And if you check these, this is my amended certificate, this is what the board adopted, and you do have negatives in this column, your board needs to reduce appropriations. I understand there's probably an exception with those folks that are in fiscal emergency. You have that limited authority to operate with a negative variance, but again, very few clients that are dealing with that. Most of you, if you see a negative here, it's a problem, and sometimes it's just an entry error that you need to correct. So I would check, what did I enter as appropriations? I want to go back to the beginning, just like we did with the resources available. We started at the beginning. So for appropriations, I want to start at the beginning as well. Let's go ahead and close out of here, and we're going to close out the budgetary reports. We're going to be staying right on this screen while I talk about the beginning of the year. Normally, appropriations start with the adoption of temporary appropriations for the upcoming year, and this usually occurs at a December meeting. So for townships, special districts, libraries, you're probably just adopting that at your December meeting. Villages, if you're adopting an ordinance, you've probably had 3 readings. So October, November, and then December is your 3rd reading of that ordinance. So it's not adopted as an emergency because, you know, it's really not an emergency. You really could see this coming. So be aware, villages, you have to know ahead of, that early, what are my temporary appropriations going to be, and get that in front of your board so you can get your 3 readings in. It's not the same for townships and libraries and special districts. So make sure you understand the legislative procedures you should be following. And we highly recommend temporary appropriations simply because the law does require appropriations to be in place for operations, not just to pay the bills. So we get people that say, well, I don't pay anything until January 26th. Why do I need temporary appropriations? We'll be adopting permanents at that meeting. Well, I don't know anybody that shuts off the electric, the natural gas, the telephone, and tell all the employees don't show up until the 26th to work. Appropriations authorize operations, not just spending. So if you actually looked at the code, operations are authorized by that board adopted legislation. This is why temporaries are required. We get a lot of people that don't do temporaries. We can't make you do them. We can't talk you into do them. We can just simply tell you what their purpose is. Temporary appropriations make your life a lot easier. I use them. I can vouch for that because they take effect automatically January 1st. And they authorize the operations up until your permanents are adopted. So generally, the temporary appropriations, UAN users can open up temporary mode, get in your revenue budgets early, get in your temporary appropriations as soon as the board adopts them, put in your purchase orders for the new year, and sit back and relax through the end of December, and January is ready to roll. That's what we try to encourage our clients to do. We can't make you do that, though. Let's go to the UAN software where appropriations are entered. So we'll go to accounting, maintenance, and appropriation budgets. At the beginning of the year, this is empty. This box is blank. And you can see right now that we're dealing with permanent appropriations. And I think the majority of our clients have permanents adopted. Temporaries expire by law on March 31st. So if you haven't put in your permanents, you will not be able to make a payment come April 1st. So you want to get those in there if the board has adopted them. If the board hasn't adopted them, then they have pretty much shut down your government for spending. So I think we're dealing with an audience that has the permanent appropriations already entered. But at the beginning of the year, this is blank, and you would simply click the Add button and choose Temporary Appropriations if your board adopted temporary appropriations. So let's talk about that. We get an awful lot of clients that call us and say, what do I choose, temporary or permanent? Well, it's not really a UAN question. What did your board adopt, temporaries or permanents? That's what you're entering in the software. If your board adopted permanents, whether they should have or not, you should be entering what they adopted. So you don't just enter the permanents as temporary because we're telling you to have temporary appropriations. If your board did not adopt temporary appropriations, if they adopted the permanents, you have to put in what they adopted. So you're making the choice based on that piece of legislation. Okay, in our recommendations and our best practices, we say enter the, your board should adopt temporaries, and then later, once you have gotten your first amended certificate back from the county, remember that process, you waited till you closed 2017, you certified your fund balances, carryover encumbrances and all that to the county, and they sent your first amended certificate. At the next board meeting, my board adopted permanent appropriations based on the current maximum amount. And then I entered those. You have to come here. You would see temporary in this column. I click the add button and choose permanent appropriations, and I add my permanent appropriations, one account code at a time by fund. It needs to match the legislation. So whatever the board has appropriated on that piece of legislation is what I should see in my total appropriations that I've entered in the software. That takes care of entering your temporaries and permanent. So that brings us to the next poll. Tony, if you'll open up those polls. Our next item is, how often does your board adopt supplemental appropriations? And I think that what you're going to find when you see the results of this is, again, it's not an everyday occurrence. So no wonder so many people are confused by this process. When we talked about the first component, the resources available, remember that we requested an amended certificate for that $5,000 grant. That was new money. We got certified on an amended certificate. And now that we've received that amended certificate back, at my board meeting last night, remember the pretend date thing, at my board meeting last night, they appropriated that $5,000. Now that's a supplemental appropriation. It's new appropriations within my new resources available. Tony, let's go ahead and close that poll and share that with the audience. You can see it's again, rarely and sometimes. This is not an everyday occurrence. No wonder so many people are confused by the process. So go ahead and hide that. And let's move along. So my board at last night's meeting adopted the $5,000 supplemental appropriations. I have the amended certificate in my hand to authorize that extra, and now I'm going to enter that appropriation. So accounting, maintenance, appropriation, well, the first thing I would have to know is, do I have an account code for this new appropriation? So let's stop at appropriation accounts. And if I go down again to the fire fund, this is the appropriation side, not the revenue side. This is a complete separate component. I'm going to look at the account codes in my fire fund to see, is there an account code that is going to be, I left the one out at the bottom, that is going to apply to this item. So we got a grant to purchase new equipment. This is a capital outlay. And so I would look, this isn't an operating item, so I'm not going to see it in salaries and others. But when I go down to the bottom under capital outlay, my 760 program, I have two capital outlay accounts. Improvement of sites, nope, that's not going to be it. But I already have machinery, equipment, and furniture. Ta-da! Well, this can go right in that account that is existing. So I don't need a separate account for this. I have an account that it would apply to. If I didn't, I would be choosing the chart of accounts over here and look at the proper account code. And if I didn't have it already activated, I would click the add button and put that in first. And now I'm ready to go to appropriation budgets. And we're going to mark the fire fund. I know that's a fire and EMS levy. I keep saying fire, and we're going to click supplemental. Okay, and what I want to look at is the account code. I'm going to put the $5,000 in. It's the very last one, machinery, equipment, and furniture. This is what my board appropriated. Again, I'm going to put fire grant. I don't have to, but I can. The effective date is always the date of the legislation. When it comes to appropriations, the date the board authorized the appropriation. So that was at last night's meeting, the 27th. And our resolution number, if I had that off the top of my head, I would put that in there. And I don't remember what I've got on my letter, so I'm going to not put it in there. So this is optional. You can do that if you like. This is not a correction. Never, ever, ever use the correction to add a new appropriation that was adopted. So this is just adding to my appropriations. We'll click Save and Close. And I would probably print a new appropriation budget report and put that in my file to make sure I've got all my appropriations entered in the software. Let me think, what will we do next? Well, when we adopt appropriations, we have to send a copy of that to our county auditor. Tony, if you pull up the PDF, sample letter number 2, when I adopted the temporaries, I sent a copy of that to the county auditor. They need to see what we have appropriated. When I adopted the permanents, the board adopts the permanents, of course, I sent a copy to the county auditor. These have nothing to do with the amended certificate. I have to show them what we have appropriated. So when we do a supplemental appropriation, I send them a copy. Enclosed, please find a copy of Resolution 2018-37, increasing appropriations to the Fire Levy Fund, 2191. If you have any questions, please do not hesitate to contact me. So this is a different letter than the first one. The first one was requesting an amended certificate. The second one is showing the Budget Commission that we have appropriated additional money. Most counties will send you back a little half-page certificate that shows you have not exceeded the maximum amount you are authorized to appropriate. So I'm going to put the copy of the resolution, this copy of this letter, and my appropriation budgets in my appropriation file, and I get my little certification back from the county. So you are sending a copy of the resolution. Could I have done that at the same time? No. The board cannot appropriate the $5,000 if you didn't have the resources available in your variance until you got the amended certificate. So you're not supposed to be doing that until the certificate is in your hands. That's completed our supplemental appropriation. Now the fire chief is going to go look at where he's going to buy the equipment authorized for the purchase. I'll put the purchase orders in, we'll buy the things, pay for them, and it's all taken care of. That completes the supplemental appropriation that's caused by the certification of new money. So sometimes you're getting an amended certificate and then appropriating the money. Other times it has nothing to do with new money. The board is changing their plan. So let's talk about that. In this case, there's no change in our resources available, but the board wants to purchase new items that were not planned in our permanent appropriations. How do I evaluate if we can make the purchase? We'll have to make up an example. So our example is we own a cemetery out in the township, and it's landlocked by farmland. And the farmer on the one side is offering to sell us 5 acres that are adjoining the current cemetery, and that is not going to happen every day. That opportunity is not going to come along. And even though we expanded on the other side, buying land from a different person a couple years ago or last year, we still don't want to lose this opportunity. So they're going to sell it to us for a cost of about $27,500. Keep in mind, there's probably going to be legal fees, filing fees, and other such expenses that go along with this kind of purchase. So I would say we would need to see if we have $30,000 to throw at this project. So the first thing I need to look at is appropriations. Let's take a look at our current appropriations. So we're going to close appropriation budgets. We'll go to accounting, reports and statements, and let's look at appropriation status. So appropriation status is something that a lot of you are familiar with. Well, you know, I'm selecting everything, but let's not do that. Let's go down to just the cemetery fund. We want to focus on that only. We'll select the first account and the last cemetery account, and Control U selects up between the check marks. And we'll display just that. So what I want to see is in our current appropriations, do I have any wiggle room to reallocate our current appropriations? Because in January, we did not plan to do this. Tony, if you'll just click that plus sign one time, it'll make it bigger than the screen, but we want to see the left side. And let's scroll down. Let's look at the bottom where we see, the account code. Get your selection mode on. We can see the account code for lands where we purchased the property on the other side before this year. And there's nothing budgeted for land purchase in the current year. And we see that we've got $10,000 for improvement of sites. Well, we've got to grade and section and mark all of those, that lot that we haven't completed yet. So we can't take that $10,000. We're going to use that money already. Our next one, machinery, equipment, and furniture. Well, we've got to buy a new mower. That thing is on its last legs. They're planning on buying a new piece of equipment, and I can't take that money either. We've got a debt payment. Well, I certainly can't take the debt payment for principal and interest to buy new property. So when I'm looking at my appropriations and I took a look at all these items up here, nothing is really popping out at me. I don't have a slush account. Some of you also show me, well, I've got this slush account that I put all the other appropriations in. I don't have that. We appropriate what we need. We do not appropriate the money that we don't think we're going to use. So now I've evaluated my current appropriations. I can see we don't have anything to reallocate. So now the next layer I want to look at, do we have an available variance? Remember, a variance is the difference between our resources available on our amended certificate and what the board has already adopted. So we'll close out of our appropriation reports and let's go back to budgetary reports. Remember our comparison of budget and appropriated, and we're just going to mark the cemetery fund this time and click display and make that just a little bigger. All right, I'm looking at the variance in this fund, and look, we've got a $59,000 variance. Now, this is a budget item. This isn't necessarily cash. This is the amount of our resources available that the board has not appropriated. And our entity has recovered from a couple of very bad years, and we're being very conservative with our money. And not only that, we're expanding, so our operating costs in future years for mowing all that's going to increase. So while we didn't appropriate the $59,000 this year, operation costs for the land expansion that we already made is going to increase in future years. So we didn't want to spend all that at once. But we do have a $30,000 variance that we can. So when my board is asking me, can we purchase this land? The first thing I have to look at is, what can we do about appropriations? Well, I can see the board can appropriate $30,000 and it'll still leave a variance in there. So we're still going to be okay when it comes to, we're not going to spend 100% of our money. All right, what would I look at next? Before we move forward, we need to consider our cash. Where are we in cash? Because some of you have funds that are supported by levies and you get a first half tax and a second half tax and nothing in between. So I have to look at cash as well. So this is kind of stepping off that current year operating budget train and making you understand that you can't only look at budget when you're making these decisions. You have to look at cash as well. So let's take a look at our fund status. Everybody is familiar with the fund status report. Let's just select all of our funds and display that. So what I need to know is, does the cemetery have the cash balance to purchase that land for about $30,000? And you can see I have $130,000 in the cemetery fund. Not really a problem, is it? So we have the cash in the fund to support that purchase as well as the budget. The next layer, a lot of people forget to look at, mark that selection mode and show them the available primary checking balance. You have to look at that as well. A lot of you keep your balance in the checking account low and keep a lot of your money in something like Star Ohio or a money market so that you're earning a better rate of interest. We need to know, is there enough cash in the primary checking? So the fund has plenty of cash, but does the checking account have cash? And if the checking account could not support that, you would need to move money from an investment to the primary checking, and that will not affect any of your fund balances. Moving money from an investment to primary simply changes the balance of your checking account so that you can write the check for the purchase of the land. So you have to look at all the layers. You would want to also look at the layer of adding this new property is going to add more operating costs. It's going to cost more to mow and maintain. We're going to have to you'd have to do the grading. We're going to have to do the marking the graves. There'll be surveying, things like that done. Are we going to have the operational costs? I want to look at in fund reports from the drop-down list, take a look at cash flow detail by fund. This is really nice when evaluating how money flows in and out of a fund to see whether or not you're going to be able to add to those operating costs. So let's change the year to 2017 and mark just our cemetery fund and display it. And it's going to be too tiny for you to see on the screen, but I just want you to just get an idea of what this report will show you. It will show you every single revenue count for that fund and every single month, what money came in and what money went out. So especially when you have seasonal workers, something like a cemetery where you have more workers in the summer, where you're paying more wages, you need to know how money is flowing in and out of this fund. You find the debt. Where's that debt payment? Okay, here it comes in May. We make a once-a-year debt payment. So you can see what month the cash is going to be needed, so that though we have $130,000 in the bank right now, a large debt payment could create a problem, making the large debt payment and buying the purchase of the land. So make sure when you're making these decisions, give your board all of the information they need to not just, can we appropriate $30,000? Because what happens is if you don't have the cash available, you're not going to be able to write the check. So that looks like my board can adopt supplemental appropriations for the $30,000. We have the cash to support the purchase as well. We can take advantage of this opportunity. Of course, we'd have to follow all the legal requirements for purchasing the land, wait until the legislation is adopted to enter the supplemental appropriation. This is not changing my amended certificate, is it? Not a single change to my amended certificate. I simply looked to see if we had an available amount that had not been appropriated. When we adopt that appropriation, I send a copy of that letter to the county auditor that shows we adopted additional appropriations to the cemetery fund. It would look very much like my last letter. Okay, that has covered the subject of supplemental appropriations. So I'm going to go ahead and close out of there, and we're going to cover the last subject, reallocation. So reallocation is something that happens when your appropriations are not where you need them. And I want to send out the next poll. How often do you reallocate appropriations? Go ahead and launch that, Tony. And I think I do hear from some fiscal officers that say, we just adopt the same permanent appropriations every year, never change the numbers. And then they spend a lot of time reallocating all year long. So you can't just cookie cutter your permanent appropriations. Things change. So your permanent appropriations should be adjusted each year to match what you're going to do with the money this year, not what you did with the money 10 years ago. So sometimes that permanent appropriation legislation should not be that cookie cutter. It should be changed so that you're not doing so many reallocations. And in some cases, sometimes the board just changes their mind. They don't get involved in the permanent appropriations. The fiscal officer is doing the best they can to put some good numbers in front of them. And the next thing you know, they are changing their mind. This year, we're not going to hire seasonal workers. We're going to farm out the mowing. So it's got to go from salaries, Medicare, OPERS, over to contracted services. And then they decide they're not going to do that, and they hire workers, and you got to reallocate it back. So sometimes it's the board changing their mind all the time. And other times it's just the fact that the money is not planned very well. So let's go ahead and close that poll and share that with you. Again, sometimes, rarely, 14% often. So I would say for those folks that are in the often category, it's either your board is not making good plans at the beginning of the year and then they change their mind all the time, or you're adopting cookie cutter appropriations that really do need to be changed. So when you're doing your 2019 tax budget, that would be the time to change the plan for appropriations to be where you need it rather than where you had it 10 years ago. Okay, let's go ahead and hide that, and where our last subject is reallocation. So when reallocating, you have to know whether you're within your legal level of control or outside your legal level of control. And if we start talking about where that comes from, we will run out of time. So we do have some good material on that on our website that you folks may not know about. Tony, if you'll go to our website, the Auditor of State seal in the upper left corner is a link right to UAN. Go to Training and Transition. Transition is where we have the videos for the new fiscal officers. And we created some prerequisite fund accounting videos. So this is kindergarten fund accounting. I think that a lot of you would find these videos helpful, but they're kind of hidden under where a new fiscal officer would find that. These prerequisite accounting, we also have prerequisite payroll, which we're not talking about today, but they're there. There's a book and the video. So Tony, if you'll click on the UAN prerequisite accounting 103 manual, open that up and then scroll down to the contents. Look at the meat involved in these books and videos. We really tried to put together the things that confused fiscal officers so they could have that kindergarten fund accounting under the belt. What are we talking about today? Changes in the budget, comparison of resources available to appropriations, changes to appropriations, conclusion. Take a look at what else is in here. Budget and cash management, transfers, advances, monitoring the budget, monitoring fund cash balances, and look below, these new capital projects. These videos and books have a lot of meat in them for current fiscal officers as well, so you want to take a look at them. But if you'll, Tony, if you'll click on changes to appropriations, right under that chapter, if you scroll down just a bit to the next page, there's the section on legal level of control. So we have it in the book. This chapter would go along with the video. If you watch this section of the video, you would also see what we're talking about. This tells you how to determine what your local legal level of control is. So it's determined locally. You don't have the same legal level of control as your neighboring township. So make sure you understand your legal level of control when it comes to reallocation. So there's our plug for the books and videos. And I'm just going to close and back in the software. So look and see, take out a look at that resource to find your legal level of control. And from there, we're going to go with you understand what your legal level of control is. So why would you reallocate money? Well, reallocating means that I have a need. We do not have appropriations in the account code where it should be spent from. And I need to reallocate it from where we don't need it to where we do need it. So this is money that has already been appropriated. It just is not going to be used where it is. Even if it's in your legal level of control, you want to be careful taking appropriations from an account code. You could really tick off a fire chief when taking their training money. So let's take a look at that. What would be an example why we need to reallocate? Well, we have had a very long, cold winter. I think you would all agree. Well, at Fake Buckeye Township, we've had a couple of mishaps with doors being left open, the furnace not working properly, and it's caused some very high electric bills at the administration building. And what this means is we don't have enough budgeted for electricity to get past April. So here it is, the end of March. I know I am going to need additional appropriations. So what I want to know is, can I reallocate something we've already got, or at the next meeting, would we be appropriating additional money from our variance if you have one? So let's take a look at the fund that has the problem. So Tony, if you go to accounting and reports, appropriation reports, I'm going to only select the account codes within my legal level of control with my electricity. So my salaries, I'm going to be in the 1,110 group. That's my fund and program. And I cannot use salaries. Salaries are not in my legal level of control. So I'm going to start with 1,110 to 11 and go down to the last 1,110 account. So again, this is my Fake Buckeye Township's legal level of control. It's not necessarily yours. So you have to know what your level is. So I'm going to click display, and these are the only account codes. I'm going to click plus just one time, full screen and then plus. Okay. And these are the only account codes I can take away from, and all I can look at is my unencumbered balance. This is the column I would be using. So over to the right, the unencumbered balance is all I have left. Let's do a minus sign. I guess it's going to be tiny for you to see, but you'll have, this is just an example. We'll try to highlight the accounts so you can see them all. Try 120. 120 does good. Okay. So in selection mode, I can show you my electricity account is the problem. And it doesn't show that I've spent, so it's, again, this is pretend, but we are pretending that my electricity is not going to make it through the year because of those high electric bills. Let's say I've got an electric bill I know I have to pay that is going to eat up the balance of my current reserve. So we had some problems that has caused that. So I know I'm going to need at least another $3,500 to get us through December's electric bill. Am I going to wait until the money runs out? No. I'm taking a look at this and keeping track of this every single month. I should know ahead of time when appropriations are running low because I'm monitoring them. So what I can take from any of these account codes in my legal level of control. So the problem is I can only pick from the unencumbered balance column because those are the only accounts that have available appropriations that are not set aside for some other purpose. And there's not a lot of them that would give me the money I want unless I take a look at something like engineering. When I look at engineering services, I have $5,000 appropriated and nothing has been spent. And I'm thinking, you know, we always budget $5,000 for engineering and we don't always have engineering work to do. So it's within my legal level of control. Could I reallocate that? Absolutely. What if the board at the next meeting say, we're hiring an engineer and it's suddenly we need that $5,000 back. So you want to be careful where you're taking from. Make sure you're not taking from something that's going to be necessary. So just because it's in your legal level of control does not mean it's something you should be borrowing from. I want to show you, go ahead and go outside that legal level of control. Tony, if you'll scroll down to the bottom of the general fund, 1,930,930. Our general fund has a contingency account, and the High Revised Code allows the general fund to have a contingency. And what that means is, I think what it says is that you can take your full general fund appropriations, multiply it by 3%, and put that 3% in a contingency account. And its sole purpose is to be reallocated to other accounts if they need a little bit of supplementation. So there is an account code for that, but it is not in my legal level of control. So what would be the smart thing for me to do? Well, if I'm not certain we're going to be using that engineering money and I have contingencies listed down here, I know that I have an account code I can borrow from, then instead of doing this today, taking it from the engineering because it's in my legal level of control and I can just do that today if I want, I would wait and put in front of the board the legislation authorizing the reallocation outside my legal level of control from contingencies to electricity where I need it. So think in terms of, yes, it's in my legal level of control, but are we going to need that money? And if I don't need it this minute, and you shouldn't be running out this minute, you should see that coming. You're going to run out and get this done ahead of time. So I can prepare this resolution and have it in front of my board and reallocate at the board meeting. They're going to adopt that the next day. I would reallocate the money, do a purchase order for the rest of the year. So I want to just show you reallocations. Let's go to accounting, maintenance, and appropriation budgets. Mark the general fund and click reallocate. And again, we would go down to that electricity account. Add the 3,500 and then go down to our contingencies and minus 3,500. So when you're reallocating, all of your positives have to be equal to all of your negatives. You can pick from more than one account. So I could have taken 1,000 from here, 1,000 from there, 200 from here, 200 from there, but all of my negatives have to be equal to all of my positives because I can't change the total fund appropriations. So my effective date, if I'm within my legal level of control, my effective date can be today. If I am outside my legal level of control, I am always going to be dating that the day the legislation was adopted. Ta-da. So go ahead and close. We don't have to save that. That covers all of our material. And I have one more poll for you. Do you have a better understanding of your current year operating budget? So I need to know if we've met some of your needs. We're going to be here for questions. We'll stay a good long while and answer any questions that you might have. But we'd like to know whether this has helped get you a better understanding. Hey, remember those fund accounting training videos? Those that is kindergarten fund accounting. And for those of you who are struggling with the current year operating budget, that is golden for helping you understand things like the difference between cash and budget, what's the amended certificate, what are my supplemental appropriations, what's my legal level of control, what's the difference between a pooled and a non-pooled investment, how should I post interest, things like that. So take a look at those videos if you haven't taken a look at them yet. Wow, huge response, 100% response. This has been a help. So we're going to go ahead and start taking questions. I want you to go ahead and chat, put those in your chat box and send them. I realize that we've got 5 minutes left, but we will stay longer and keep answering questions for you. So go ahead and stick them in your chat box. Wow, I'm really, really happy that we're getting such a positive feedback on that. All right, start sending those questions in. And now you should be able to see, there's the Fiscal Integrity Act. You always have to self-report. Don't forget to self-report. You only have 60 days. So please, let's get this self-reported so you don't lose the training hours. First question I just had was, is there a training video for the tax budget? Yes, on our website right now under training and then under budget, there is a budget video, and that was, I think, from 2016, and we're going to be doing a live budget webinar in April. But if you want to get started on your tax budget now, that video that's on our website is still relevant. All right, here's one. My council adopted my permanent 2018 budget, and I went in and made my changes, but you mentioned I need to manually enter them as permanent. So can I not make what I already entered permanent? So we get a lot of people making this mistake. Tony, if we'll go to appropriation budgets, we should be on that form. All right, so if instead of adding your permanents, you simply went to your temporaries and did supplementals, you're still under temporaries and they're going to shut down. So what you want to do first is go to accounting, maintenance, appropriation, budgets, and take a look. Does it say in the far right column permanents? If it says permanents, you've already entered your permanents. If it says temporary and the amounts are what your permanents are, you skipped a step. You need to click add, choose permanent appropriations, and I don't have any funds to do that with, but yes, you need to add your permanent appropriations. Has to match your legislation. We get a lot of people confused about that. So when permanents are adopted, they have to be added as permanents. They completely replace temporaries. Okay, I've got another question. To reallocate, do you need to close the blanket on the account code you're reallocating from? Okay, well here's, let me read this question exactly. To reallocate, do you need to close the blanket to the fund you are reallocating revenue? Ouch. Okay, so you just took component number 1 and shoved it in component number 2. So let me read that question as it should be so that you fully understand what you're doing. When you're reallocating, you are only reallocating appropriations. It's not revenue. You are reallocating appropriations within one fund from one account code to another. Tony, if you'll pull up the general fund again and choose reallocate. Remember what I said about the unencumbered balance. You can only reallocate the unencumbered balance. So if I have a blanket certificate sitting on an account code for, oh, I don't know, let's take a look at payment to another political subdivision, 1,110,370. Let's say that I don't need all of that $2,500 and I want to reallocate it to another place. I would have to first close or reduce the BC that's in place, because it's not unencumbered if it's sitting on a blanket certificate or a purchase order. So before I came to the reallocation screen, I would have to go to the accounting utilities purchase order utility and either reduce or close the purchase order on that account, so that when I came into here, it had an unencumbered balance. Okay, I hope that answered that question. What was the credit hours to book? It will show you the on that website. It'll show you that you have an hour and a half, I believe, of credit hours. You won't get to put in a certain number. It just defaults to the time. Okay, here's one. If my county did adjust my revenue figures and I adjusted them using the checkbox apply as correction, do I need board approval? No, not on your revenue budgets. I would bring it to the board's attention that the county tweaked your numbers and you have corrected the UAN software to match. But I have never heard that there needed board approval for that. You really didn't have any choice. The county tweaked your numbers and you need your UAN software to match. That's a very good question. Again, I would bring it up at the meeting. I'm a new user of the UAN in 2018. I do not have any information for the budget certificate. Do I have to add one? Well, in UAN, if you came, we had a few clients come in January 1st. Of course, when you went to, let's go ahead and close out of this screen. Close that screen, Tony. And let's go to budget transactions and year-end balance certificate. When you click add, you're not going to see any carryover fund balances. You could fill this in manually. The software is going to let you fill this in from the numbers on your paper books. So you can use this as a form fill-in for those of you who don't have a prior year automatically pulling in. Those of you that do, these are accurate numbers. You shouldn't be changing them. That's a very good question too. Tony, how about you? You have any questions we can do?
All kinds of them.
Okay. They're too tiny. You'll have to read them out loud. Let's get the microphone over here.
Where you can start.
I can't see. It's too tiny. So pick a question, read it out loud.
Okay, some of them are continuations, I guess. Okay. I receive more money from Otarma for a specific purchase. I directly apply it to the purchase when I receive the check. Is this correct? Or do I need to get an amended certificate?
When you say I directly applied, I don't know what you mean. So I don't know whether you're doing a receipt and then a refund receipt, or so the question doesn't have the context I need to answer the question. We would need more information. That's probably something you want to call the support line with exact information.
Okay, so does the fiscal officer need a motion or resolution from the trustees in order to request an amended certificate from the county auditor?
Generally, the amended certificate is the responsibility of the fiscal officer. Again, if your procedures at your entity have always been that the board is the one that governs whether you can do that, generally it's the fiscal officer that gets that done and presents it to the board. So when you know that you got the grant and that you're going to accept it, like in our situation there would be no reason to wait to request an amended certificate. Generally, the board expects you to do that. So if you've got some internal policy that says you have to wait for their approval to do it, then you would have to wait. But I don't think that's very common. So generally, the board is expecting you to get the amended certificate in place, and I know a lot of you are laughing, many of your boards don't even know what the amended certificate is. So they expect you to have the paperwork in place that they need when they need to change appropriations. I've got a request to put that training information back up on the board. So there's the self-reporting. How about another question, Tony?
If there is a grant that you receive that reimburses you for items you already spent, would you still have to notify the auditor?
Excellent question. So this is a grant, right?
If there is a grant.
Okay. When you get a grant, you should not be spending, and I know that these grants reimburse you afterward. You should not be spending the money, posting the grant back as a payment adjustment, because then your annual financial report does not show you got a grant. So grants it's very different than if you get a BWC refund. Of course, you can always do a payment adjustment when it's refunding your current year payment. But when you're getting a grant, that money should be going in as revenue. It should be you should be having that certified on your amended certificates if it's a substantial amount of money, rather than doing a payment adjustment. I know those are a lot of reimbursing grants, but they still should be posted in as grant revenue rather than a payment adjustment. Very good question. I got another question about a payment adjustment. It's not really about the budget. Payment adjustments, if you are receiving a refund on a current year payment, yes, you can do a payment adjustment rather than a receipt. One of the questions I got is, I received money back from an insurance company on a claim or a policy that was canceled. So I received money back from the insurance company on a policy we canceled. So you made the payment this year. The policy was canceled and you got a refund. Yes, I would do a payment adjustment rather than a receipt. But if the payment was made in the prior year, you can't do a payment adjustment. You would have to do a receipt. So it's going to depend on whether it's a current year payment.
All right, I have a good one. Do we need to do an amended certificate if we are not spending the funds until the next fiscal year, like receiving a grant in December?
Okay, so let's talk about that. So I guess a follow-up on that, I would want to know, did you get the grant award letter in December, or did you actually get the grant money in December? I mean, I have to know the answer to, did the money come in, or did you just get the award letter? If you get the award letter and it's going to take place next year, I wouldn't get an amended certificate at the end of the year. When is the money coming in? That's the year that you should have the amended certificate. I guess I hope that answered that question. Again, don't hesitate to call us on the support line.
All right, if an error is found on the year-end balances and the balances have already been submitted to the county auditor, is it permissible to spend a corrected file or send in a corrected file later?
I'm sorry, say that again.
If an error is found on the year-end balances and the balances have already been submitted to the county auditor, is it permissible to send a corrected file in later?
Okay, well, again, that's your county's procedure. So if you certified the wrong numbers to your county at the beginning of the year and you are just discovering it now, you have to notify them. It's going to be up to that county budget commission whether they're going to correct your figures. But yes, I would send them a new resources available so they can see clearly that you sent them the wrong numbers earlier in the year. We had a lot of calls about that. I haven't had a single person call and say my county won't do that. So yes, if you found that you certified the wrong numbers, send them a new resources available and tell them you made a mistake and ask them to correct that.
All right, so here's another one. I had to void a check in 2018 that was written in 2017, so it changed my beginning fund balance by $112 from our $3 million budget. Do I need to send an amended certificate for this?
Oh, that's an excellent question. Yes, a fund balance adjustment is going to change. It's not changing your revenue budgets, but you just changed the beginning of your balance. This happens also when you're doing audit adjustments. Think in terms of that. Tony, I have a sample letter number 3 as well. Let's pull that up. So that is a very good question. And I did want to bring that up if we got the opportunity. When you void a prior year warrant, you're putting money back in a fund. So that's always a positive change to your beginning of your fund balance. So yeah, I would send a letter to the county auditor. It's not the example that's on the screen here, but I would send a letter to the county auditor saying I voided a prior year warrant that increased my beginning fund balance in the general fund by $120. please correct my beginning of year fund balance. And then I would send them a new resources available to show them that difference, and probably the fund balance adjustment report as well. So I would document that. So we get a lot of people that do audit adjustments. Anytime you do audit adjustments, it also requires a notification that you've changed your beginning fund balance. But what about those funds that if you have appropriated 100% of your resources available, and in our example here on the screen, we had to do an audit adjustment, $4,000 was incorrectly posted to the Road and Bridge Fund when it should have been posted to the general fund. Completely accidental, and audit has moved it back from the Road and Bridge Fund to the general fund, but my board had appropriated 100% of my resources available, and I can't reduce my amended certificate until we reduce appropriations. So I noticed that I have told the county auditor that because of our audit, we had to change the beginning of year fund balances to correct an error, and they had to reduce the appropriations in the Road and Bridge Fund by $4,000. So I'm sending them a copy of the legislation reducing appropriations to the Road and Bridge Fund, followed by the request for an amended certificate to increase the general fund and reduce the Road and Bridge Fund. So you can see how that letter, the county auditor needs to see when this audit adjustment creates an over appropriation, the board has to reduce appropriations in that fund, and you get an amended certificate for both funds. It's changing the beginning of year fund balance. Good question. So yes, when you're voiding prior year warrants, it's adding to the beginning of year fund balance.
Okay, we do have a lot of questions. Will I be able to print out the sample letters for later review? I think they'll be included in the recording. They'll see them there.
I tell you, yeah, they will be in the recording. So I suppose what you could do is when the recording's on the screen, when it's up on our website, go to that place, do a print screen, and print that for your files for a sample. And again, find out from your county what you should be doing. Some of these counties have specific forms they want you to fill out.
We're asking for a review for where you would find the year-end balance report.
The year-end balance certificate is contained under budget, transactions. Tony, if you'll go with me there. Just minimize. Budget, transactions, year-end balance certificate. A lot of people get confused. We had people who changed the year to 17, and what they did is certified 2016 year-end balances incorrectly. So on the year-end balance certificate, the year is the current year, not last year. It's got to be the current year. And then once you add it, if you've got your revenue budgets in, all you have to do is add it, give it a name, save it, and print it. We're looking through the questions again. The name of the webinar is How to Manage Your Current Year Operating Budget.
Can revenue budget numbers be entered before closing the end of the year?
Absolutely. Good question. This is the whole purpose of temp mode, is to give you early access to the new year. So sitting in December, usually around after our year-end conference, a little bit after the 6th, you've got access to 2019 coming up. So yes, install the year-end update, open temporary mode, and the first thing you do is put in your revenue budgets. Remember, go back to your official certificate you got back from the tax budget, check and see if the county certified your revenue estimates. If not, tweak your numbers to match and put those in as your revenue budgets. First thing you do in the new year.
How do I know my legal level of control?
Again, watch the legal level of control is spelled out in those fund accounting prerequisite videos. Tony, if you'll take them there again, go to our website. Again, the link is right in the upper left corner. Go to training and transition. Those are our videos for our new fiscal officers. And right here under phase 2, UAN prerequisite training, that is contained in video and book number 103. And if you scroll down to Changes to appropriations. Legal level of control is contained in that chapter. Legal level of control. So read through that or watch the video or both. Help you understand your legal level of control. And when you're reallocating outside of that, make sure you're getting board adopted legislation to approve it.
I guess we just had another, just took a call. What was the response about the continuing ed? You know, it's self-reporting. Here's our Fiscal Integrity Act. You self-report there. It's not a certificate receiving situation.
No, you're not going to get a certificate from us. You are going to go to that website, log in. If you have difficulty logging your training hours or choosing the training, there's the telephone numbers of the people to call, and they will help you. We can't help you at UAN support. All we can do is tell you the name of the class, how to manage your current year operating budget, and they will help you get credit for that. And again, it might not be posted yet because the webinar is today. They should have it up today or later today. Okay, that looks like all the questions we have. You have been a fantastic audience.